Hi, it's me again, your best friend, the person who lives behind your house secretly, Duncan Trussell. Today, we have an incredible podcast for you. I got really lucky to find this amazing book by Cody Delistraty called The Grief Cure. As most of you probably know, I have lost some parents. It happens when you get around my age. In fact, I remember something I heard Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche say, which is like, once you get to a certain age, everyone just starts dropping like flies. This is a happy way to start an episode, but it's true. And more than likely, you've experienced loss, maybe not of a parent, but even just of a pet. I mean, sometimes that can feel as powerful, especially if your dog breastfed you. Sorry, I had to cut the camera. Just thinking about what that was like, I was the run of the litter, and that's not fun. Having to push the other puppies away, but they nip your cheek, and then no more milk. If you've lost anybody, there's a lot of great books to read, but I would start with The Grief Cure, not just because it has some more modern takes on grieving and the future of grieving, but also because it looks into the history of how humans have dealt with death. And just learning that, just knowing that stuff, I think could be immensely helpful, especially if you're one of the grieving people out there who's gone completely bonkers, as most of us do. There might be some explanations in there for you about why these days when you lose somebody, you can feel completely wobbled. Especially the fact, and I just found this out today, spoiler, bereavement leave. You only get 5 days. Lose a parent, 5 days. And then you're back at the fucking office. Wow. What a slap in the face, huh? That's just like Lucifer just draping his festering demonic balls right over your heart. So I'm sorry, that's probably not the best way to describe the book. Cody, if you're watching this, forgive me for saying that. But you must order this book, The Grief Cure. It's everywhere. It just came out about a month ago, and you're going to love it. Before we jump into the podcast, got some dates coming up. If you're listening to this the week of August 8th, you can find me at the Helium Comedy Club in Buffalo from August 8th to August 10th. After that, I'm going to be at Side Splitters in Tampa, Florida. Come see me there. We added an extra show on Thursday. So if you couldn't get tickets, that's how you can get tickets. I'm going to be at the Wilbur November 1st. You can get tickets there. Also, I'll be at the San Diego Comedy Store coming up. All those dates and many more are at duncantrussell.com. All right, let's jump into this awesome podcast with Cody Delistraty, author of The Grief Cure, now available everywhere. Cody, hi, great to meet you.
Hey, Duncan, good to be here.
Welcome to the DTFH. I wanted to, it's kind of a weird way to start a podcast. You've written this wonderful book on grief, The Grief Cure. We've both been through something that so many others have. Lost both of our moms to cancer. And I wanted to talk to you about Westworld. Have you seen Westworld?
I saw half of the first season. I heard it got less good as time went on, but I love the premise.
Right. And fortunately, I think this probably happened in the first or second episode. I can't remember when exactly, but one of the androids sees a picture of something outside the theme park. I don't know, it's a city, a car, whatever. And she goes, I don't see anything at all. And because they don't know how to react to whatever it is out there. They've been programmed. They just don't have the capacity to understand anything outside of the time period they're in. So they just don't see it at all. Now, you talk about how you lose a parent and you quickly begin to realize that no one knows what to say. So you get the, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And they feel uncomfortable saying that because they know they're just regurgitating the only sentence that they know to say when something like that happens. And I've loved that you shine a spotlight on the, I guess you could say, I don't know, grief illiteracy in our, at least in this country. Maybe in some other cultures, I like to fantasize they're completely comfortable with the reality of death. But here, when not only when you are confronted with the ultimate reality, but when those around you are confronted with it, it's like being in a video game and you've run out of dialogue lines to say to the NPC. We just don't know how to respond. So what are your thoughts on that illiteracy, grief illiteracy?
I mean, firstly, that was a really good Evan Rachel Wood impression. It was very short, but
I worked on it for hours.
It was shockingly solid. But secondly, I mean, that's an enormous question. I think we really get in the US, the UK, a lot of Western countries, we really get stuck in what you're describing really. And it's really like a vicious cycle where the person who wants to confront the griever is weary of sort of aggravating or reopening the wound or pushing too far. So there's a real top level superficiality of, oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Like that sort of thinking, as you're saying. And then the griever doesn't want to be a burden. So they don't want to push it either. But usually both parties are really, they would love to act in good faith and they'd love to be there for each other. Right. They just don't know how. And we follow this sort of BS social script basically that you're describing. And that's a relatively new phenomenon is what I find so interesting because really in the early 20th century, you didn't have that. The history of grief in the West is so fascinating. In the late 18th century, you have this historian called Philippe Barrès who's talking about he called it the era of tamed death, when death was super accepted, super integrated into life. People would almost always die at home in their bed. They'd be surrounded by loved ones. They'd be usually in control of their death. Death also just happened so often because of high mortality rates at that time. And then you get to the early 20th century, you have, Freud proposing that a certain kind of grief can be really solved to some degree in the therapist's office. You have a rise in happiness culture. You have this really interesting phenomenon, especially in the US, where during World War I, there's so much death that, American women used to wear black crepe. They used to wear the black mourning gowns upon death. And I found these really interesting historical archives that showed President Woodrow Wilson when he wanted to really drum up more interest in the war effort, because he had run on a relatively isolationist platform and there wasn't a lot of excitement about going in the First World War. And there's all these feminists and or early feminists and women's rights activists who were marching basically against it, saying our husbands are going to die in this war. What's the point of this war? And they'd be in full black mourning on hot Manhattan days. And he said, what if instead of wearing your black mourning, you just wore a little armband and it had a little gold star that showed if someone died who is close to you. Dispense with the black, maybe don't even march, just sort of keep it to yourself. And you hear that in the UK too, the keep calm and carry on ethos. Right. There's a real shift that I really identify as happening because of war, frankly, and wanting to keep death out of the public sphere. And then it just only amped up through the 20th century. You have this guy, Geoffrey Gore, who's an English anthropologist who went around the UK in the 1960s and 1970s and found that fewer and fewer people were talking to even their neighbors about their loss. There was a real sense of this was having health issues on people. Sorry, this is quite a long,
I love it. No, this is amazing.
History,
this is what's great about your book. This is so great because, we need... I need it. I shouldn't say we. I always pluralize. I'm such a pussy. I always say we because I'm afraid to say I need it. Like learning this stuff is for me. It just helped a lot. Just that alone, because when you are in grief land and you're no longer in like America land. Which
isn't it fascinating that those things are separated too, right? They shouldn't be separated. They should be that should be the same world. Susan Sontag wrote about the land of the healthy and the land of the sick. What if those were the same?
Oh my God, it's like, okay, I'm not gonna go. I'm gonna try to. I'm thinking of how to compress this. I got in a little bit of trouble because somebody did a vlog reviewing a hotel at Disney world, this Star Wars hotel, and just talking about how it wasn't true to lore and a lot of other stuff. I only watched like 2 minutes. It was like the vlog itself was longer than the first Star Wars movie. I don't have time to watch that. But one of the complaints was it's not true to lore. And I'm looking at videos of this hotel, right? And it's just like, people in cargo shorts walking around a spaceship. It's like, if anything takes you out of the Star Wars experience, it's a dude in cargo shorts with a lightsaber. I'm sorry. My imagination isn't powerful enough to turn that into a Jedi. It's just never going to happen. But when you are living in whatever you want to call it, default reality might be a cooler way to say it than America land, you buy in. And the Woodrow Wilson thing really explains a lot to me, because if you look at war and the military-industrial complex, really you're talking about industrialization is what you're talking about. You're talking about post-industrial society, and we need people to value work, war, sacrifice for the machine over their own lives just for the damn thing to function. And so suddenly it's like someone presses a button and you realize, holy fuck, I am not on the Millennium Falcon. Like,
I mean,
yeah. You look around and you realize, holy shit, everyone is fully committed to this facade that has been constructed in the abyss, some kind of plummeting theme park plummeting through the abyss with an invisible sniper with bullets made of cancer, heart attacks, diabetes, car accidents, just taking out moms and kids and uncles randomly. And we're all supposed to be walking around like, keep calm and carry on. just from time to time, someone you love more than anything in the world who breastfed you will disappear eternally.
And it's at every level too, as you're identifying. It's at the interpersonal, the discussion with the neighbor, the awkwardness, and then it's also there's no federal law for bereavement leave in the U.S. The average time off is 5 days in the U.S. 5 days. Your mom, and it's only one if it's for a close friend or a chosen partner, like an unmarried partner. 5 days though. Like I was finishing college when my mom died, but my dad worked for the state government. 5 days is like, you can sort of rearrange her side of the bed and her nightstand. You can't fully grapple with grief. Like it's wild. So yeah, it's absolutely, as you're saying, it's baked into every aspect, where it's this real ethos of get back to normal, get back to life, get back to work is a big one. And you see that in so many things. You see that in the misinterpretation of the 5 stages of grief, this idea that you'll get to acceptance, this mythical notion of closure. It permeates pop culture. It truly is everywhere.
Okay, the 5 stages of grief, which you talk about, I love it. And it's the first time I've ever seen an indictment of the 5 stages of grief, which is also vindicating, because the 5 fucking stages of grief is the most ridiculous bullshit. But you see a thing like that and you're like, I wonder which stage I'm at right now. And, if you look out of the world, nothing is like that. There is, nothing that is organic has some clear-cut stages. It's like, and with grief, you get tricked into thinking, okay, I've made it to 4 or whatever. And with grief, suddenly the floor drops out. One day you're fine walking around. You're like, holy shit, you know what? Maybe that 5-day thing makes sense. And then the next thing, you're just on your bed sobbing, just because you thought, you know what, I'll never smell that house again that I lived in for so many years. And you're just sobbing, but you were fine. And then you're sobbing, and then you start grieving for the grief. And then a few years pass, and you're like, yeah, I lost a parent. We all do at my age. And then boom, it hits you hard on some day because the fall is coming, and it reminds you of taking a walk with them. And it's seemingly endless.
Yeah, it's absolutely everywhere. And I don't hold at fault Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who came up with the idea of 5 stages of grief, because she originally, in her 1969 book On Death and Dying, she wasn't even talking about people grieving. She was interviewing terminally ill patients in a Chicago hospital. So those people, how do you grapple with your own death? And I really had different stages, different iterations, I should say, maybe, in how I considered the stages of grief. Because at first, that was the only thing I knew. I was like, my mom died. I had been a good student. I was like, I'm going to be a good griever as well, right? So I know closure, I know 5 stages. Then looking at the 5 stages more, you start to realize what you're saying. There's really not a linearity to grief. There's really not a movement through it. There was a really interesting study in 2007 that found that a majority of people do tend to hit those things in grief that Kubler-Ross had mentioned, like depression, bargaining, acceptance. But the big issue with it, and she did eventually come around to say, yeah, there's some application to grief. But the big issue for me is that it's so often read as prescriptive. It's read as a blueprint. And I was talking to a psychiatrist who said she had a client come to her and say, yeah, I've been grieving and I've been trying to get my husband to get me really mad because I want to get to the anger stage faster. Right. Wow. So it's this idea that like you can just check it off, boom, 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 get to acceptance, and then, you know, back to work, you're good to go. And that's just not, as you're saying so correctly, that's just not how grief functions. That's not how it works. And to believe that it does is to really slow yourself from the real work and the real grappling. I do think it comes from a good place. It comes from this collective desire. If I can say, oh, I'm angry too, you're angry too, there's some feeling of camaraderie. But yeah, it can't be viewed as a blueprint because that doesn't exist in grief.
This episode of the DTFH was supported by BetterHelp. It's incredible how, I've got some things that I have to do every week, or I feel like an asshole. Like if I don't make it to the gym, if I don't do my 700 push-ups a day, if I don't do my 200-pound kettlebell slinging exercise, you know, the thing you throw a kettlebell hundreds of yards through your yard at the flag of whatever country you think is the worst country. These are the things I have to do, or I just don't feel right. But it's incredible. I don't know what your self-care thing is. Maybe you take long baths or eat rose petals or stare at the moon while you're wearing Hawaiian shirts, which actually I've heard is great for your skin. It's funny how what often gets left out is just basic therapy. Maybe it's not as exciting as covering yourself in blessed rose petals in a bathtub filled with holy water, but my God, it sure helped me. And if you're thinking about giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a wonderful choice for you because you can do it all online. That means no going to a therapist's office and sitting there and having, what magazine do you pick to read while you're waiting to go into therapy? The whole thing is awkward, but BetterHelp lets you do this all from home. You just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist. They make it easy to switch any time you want to, which can be really important. Why not try therapy? Make it part of your self-care regimen. You can still take those holy water baths, but they're going to feel a lot better if you're going to therapy. I guarantee it. Never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Right now, go to BetterHelp.com. That's HELP, BetterHelp, and use offer code Duncan to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com. Thank you, BetterHelp. What was the amount of time between your mom's diagnosis and when she passed away?
4 years. So she got sick when I started college. Same for you?
Just about maybe 5.
What kind of cancer? Breast cancer. Yeah. Metastatic melanoma from my mom. Very light-skinned, blonde, blue-eyed woman. Yeah.
Yeah. So and you remember the call where or were you with her in person when she told you?
I was the first person. I was there so she was dropping me off my first year. I was studying abroad through this weird program, and we were outside of a pizza place, and she felt a lump under her clavicle. And she said, she told me, she said there's a lump. She was super fit. She was always trying to eat healthy. She was a dietitian by training. She worked in a hospital. Like she was on her game. So we were, oh, this is fine. This is going to be nothing. You know, she's in her early 50s. And then over the next few months, she had trials, and they said, you know, she has stage 4 metastatic melanoma. We need to start doing some trials. We did experimental trials at NIH, the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda. I'm from Spokane, Washington, and so we did some stuff at home in Spokane, other stuff in Seattle. But yeah, it was 4 years. How for you was it was 4 years, and how did it sort of evolve as far as treatment and expectation?
Okay, yeah, it was, well, you know, what's interesting about it is like with these kinds of things, like if we were in Vegas, I would bet $1 million that you have a much better memory than I do. But with these,
I don't know about that. That there's something with trauma where it really, I have very fractured snapshots. It feels like someone took a Polaroid while walking very quickly. So you have a sort of like a swiftly blurred, right?
Yes.
Right? You can, I don't know.
You remember it forever. I was in a restaurant eating. Obama has just been elected. He's giving a speech. Phone call from my mom. I'm gonna die. Like it's the doc is it. You know, she had a tumor removed from her breast years before, and the doctor was like, you're gonna die. Like this is, you know, there's like this. We didn't have your doctor. Our doctor is up in North Carolina. He's like, you better just pick out a coffin. And
jeez, really?
Hardcore. Hardcore.
Wow.
And
God, do they teach that in medical school? It's not bedside manner. My God. And your mom, that's fascinating though, that your mom was that forthright with you too.
Yeah. Which was one of the, you know, beautiful things about her is that she had somehow avoided the conditioning to make it seem lighter than it was and to tiptoe around it. She knew that ultimately it's better just to tell the truth, and like it's gonna like be devastating. But then you know, it didn't happen as soon as the doctor said. It was 4 years.
It's a long time when you're talking stage 4 stuff, which it sounds like your mom was too.
Because she was doing chemo, but she's also doing like holistic stuff and lowering sugar intake, and so. But I want to talk about those years in between when you find out and when they pass on for you. Because here you are, you're in school, man. Like you are like, and you're kicking ass. Like it seems like you're like a fish to water. Like
I was doing okay. I was doing pretty good. I don't know. Not
you're doing
1%.
better than me, my friend. But my you know, it's like, it seems like this is an exciting time for anybody.
Yeah, of course.
And suddenly the shadow of death falls over this primary experience. So how did you, in which I think this is the beginning of grief. Like people think grief happens when they drop their body, but grief happens way before that. So you're having to contend with this ultimate reality and default reality. And my God, the shame that I would feel for the thoughts that would spring into my mind of like, you know, this is supposed to be a good time for me. And I like, all I can think about is like, you're going to die. And so did you feel anything like that?
Yeah, there was just a real push and pull between my mom and me, where she really wanted me to stay in school and really, you know, push forward, continue on. There was definitely still a belief that she was going to get better, but I was really reluctant to stay. I wanted to just drop out. I wanted to go home. I wanted to, and I did go with them to Maryland, to Seattle for these trials and many nights spent sleeping on cots in hospital rooms and that sort of thing. But really, when it became clear she was going to die, really didn't happen until a few months maybe before she did. And at that point, I went home. She was not doing any more trials. I just talked to all my teachers. I said, I'm going to do my finals later. I just can't do this right now. But I definitely harbor a lot of regret for not having left earlier, but it's hard to, because those were her wishes that I not do that. So there was, it was a bit of a strained dynamic in that.
And again, this all has its roots in grief illiteracy. It should, in some fantasy utopia, a thing like this occurs, and people aren't programmed. What does the hero do in movies when the hero is dying? What does the hero say to their friends? Go on without me. Leave me here. It's built into us, this fucking war mentality. Like, you die alone, the other soldiers need to go ahead and kill more people. And this is what the hero does. So to be dying and to say, and I don't know, my mom would similarly wanted me to live my life, but I don't know how much of that was actually live your life and how much of that was the right thing to do is to die alone. Not literally alone, but you know what I mean? I don't know. And on the other side of it, because it isn't built into our system, because we prioritize career, work, production over human connection and fundamental human experiences that are not replicable, thank God. I mean, you only lose one mom. You end up in these bizarre predicaments that I think probably are relatively new. I don't know the history of that. Do you know anything about the history of when someone dies, being with them during that process? Or
I mean, it just happened so much quicker in the past, right? Like medicine is such the big. You get the cancers our moms got; they're gone in weeks, probably, right? Months. Now there's no. So yeah, I mean that's a big thing. I don't know if I'm not sure. It's one of those things. Yes, I regret it to some degree, but also I don't know how it would have played out had I dropped out, if that would have been more stress for her. It's one of those things that you can play over and over again in your brain, but you only get to live life one way, and you only get to sort of imagine the other way that it could have been lived, and it's unclear exactly what it would have looked like. But I was grateful to get to be home toward the end of her life, and I had a lot of meaningful experiences. It was incredibly high stress in that anytime I'd, go out to the grocery store, I'd definitely have my phone on, this volume on very loud. And I tell my brother, if she has real trouble breathing, you need to call me immediately. There was just a sense of at any time she could die. But in the few days before she died, my mom, my dad, my brother and I sat down, my brother and me sat down at our kitchen table, and I basically interviewed my mom for 2 days. She was really having trouble talking by the second, really having trouble breathing, but it's something she really wanted to do. It's something I really wanted to do. And we got to really get into questions as trivial as what's her favorite ice cream flavor, to favorite movie, to as significant as what would she tell my brother and me on our future wedding days? And that was so valuable. And it felt like I'm loath to use the word closure, because I don't think there's such thing, but it gave us a real sense of connectedness really toward the end, and unity as a family. And that was one of the most valuable things I got to do in those final days.
Very brave of you.
I don't know.
No, when I did this podcast that ended up on the Midnight Gospel that we use for the last episode, and see, this is, I'm very impressed with you, because you're a very brave person. You confronted this situation in a way that I did not have the courage to do. After your mom passed on, you start reading memoirs. You really wanted to work with the grief. And
yeah, I think some of it was misplaced. I think a lot of it, but yeah, I was pretty keyed in, pretty locked in.
There was a confrontation there. That a confrontation was happening that a lot of us don't have the guts to do. And all of my spiritual bullshit, it went right out the fucking window. Oh my God, the instructions from people I love and respect, all the Ram Dass teachings on death and all of the stuff of feel it, be with it, love yourself, all of it out the fucking window. I didn't want anything to do with it. And people will come up to me and say, oh, that last episode of the Midnight Gospel with your mom meant so much to me. And I love that. But the truth of it is that she knew we were going to do a podcast. Because we did two. We did one when she had a few years left to live, and then another when she was about to die. Yeah. And that second one, oh, Cody, I'm downstairs in the guest room of the house on my Kindle reading The Hunger Games. I don't even like those books, but I am fixated on The Hunger Games all of a sudden. I'll just sit down. This makes sense. On a mattress on the floor, reading The Hunger Games. Mom upstairs. You hear the oxygen pump. You hear that fucking sound, that metronome of death. And then I remember she called to me. She's like, it's time. It's time to do this. And my heart sank. I didn't want to do it because I knew it'd be our last podcast. I knew it would never happen again. So I did not have the courage that you had. And that to me is really impressive.
If it makes you feel better, and I think this is much more aligned with sort of your experiences, it took me something like 4 years to listen to those audio files. There was a real confrontation of a real internal conflict and a real sense of I'm confronting the proof of her death if I listen to this. And that took a very long time. I really shut myself out from being with other people. I had this sense that I didn't want to be a burden. I had this sense that I need to, quote unquote, move on. And yeah, so I don't know. It happened to us at different times, but I think it happened to both of us. Also, Hunger Games, it is so fascinating what we read in grief. I remember I woke up the morning after my mom died and I read David Sedaris's Me Talk Pretty one day at our grocery store while having French toast or something. I was just having to pretend this is a normal day. Nothing, your mother didn't just die and you didn't just see her corpse in the bedroom at 11 p.m. last night and the coroner came. It's no, it's or the body bag guy came. No, it's just a regular day. And so there's this total, as sort of, I think you're saying too, this splitting of the brain and of the mind where one side's over here, one side's over there. And yeah, you can know the Ram Dass things to do and things to be unified with the universe, but to actually do that is a matter entirely different.
That's right. And the body bag guy. See, these are the tiny blasphemies that people who haven't experienced this don't understand. So here you are, this place your mom is your. Well, I don't know if this is the place you grew up but
it is, yeah.
Okay, so here's the home you grew up in. This is maybe where you breastfed. This is where you learned to walk. This is, and there's a smell specific to your parents' house, and there is a feeling when you come home that. Folks who still have parents on this side of the veil, you probably take it for granted. I sure as fuck did. But there's a feeling you get when you come home, a sense of, yeah, sure, you are annoyed by your parents probably or whatever, but it's a kind of relaxation that you might not get other places ever again. I don't know. But suddenly, in the midst of this temple to your past, a body bag guy shows up. A dude comes in he's just on the clock.
A dude with a van. A dude with a
with
van.
a fucking van pulls up. Show's over, folks. Okay, and I hope you enjoyed your childhood. Great. Where's the body? Zips it up, plops it in a van. You don't know where it's going. He's driving down the fuck. He might stop at In-N-Out. He might get a burger. Who the fuck knows? That's your mom. So these blasphemies appear that just are so jarring that it makes you feel like you're in a dream or something.
Oh yeah, the surreality of death is hard to overstate, and we see it so often in pop culture, but you never see the face usually in newspapers and magazines. Death is always there, but it's always a little depersonalized, and so to see it really up close, really personal, it feels your mind can't really find where it belongs, and so I've seen it before in fiction. It must belong in fiction.
I mean, this is the literal wall. You hit the wall. It is an invisible boundary in whatever this thing is that we're all sharing, where there's clearly something else going on here, but we just can't wrap our minds around it. And This episode of the DTFH has been supported by Tushy. Water everywhere, but I use paper to wipe. That's a quote from one of my favorite poems, Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who was writing a very epic poem about a ship full of men who refused to clean their asses in a civilized way, but only used toilet paper. And finally, they became so stinky that seabirds devoured all of them, leaving just their bones on that ship lost at sea. Coleridge knew something that many of us who use bidets know. We know there was PB, pre-bidet, and PB, post-bidet. And the difference between these two eras in a human's life is the difference between the dark ages and post-industrial revolution society, to quote Carl Sagan. Because once you start actually cleaning your ass with a bidet, your life changes, and it's hard to go back. Sometimes you have to. You go to some place, there's no bidet. You got to use paper to wipe. But my God, friends, if you want an easy way to change your life, stop wiping your filthy, filthy ass with paper. You wouldn't use that to clean poop off of your hand. What do you do when you have poop on your hand? It happens to me all the time, every day, many times a day. My hands are covered in poop, and I put them under a sink and I scrub. Why is your ass any different? Why are you creating a caste system with your body? Clean your butt. And I know you've probably looked up bidets. You recognize you stink, and you've looked at me like, I can't afford that. I can't install that. That looks way too complicated for me. And this is where Tushy comes to your rescue. The sweet darlings over at Tushy sent me a Tushy bidet. Yeah, it's a travel bidet. And go ahead, shake your head at that in the same way people probably shook their head at the train or the airplane. Humans shouldn't fly. Humans shouldn't ride a train. Humans shouldn't bring a bidet with them where they travel. But, my friends, once you go Tushy, you will never go back. These are high-level, premium, hardcore bidets that you can travel with. And the most important part is they're easy to install. That's the main thing. It works. They figured it out. They understood the market. Sometimes we get a bidet. Sometimes we realize, oh my God, I'm going to have to hire an electrical engineer. I'm going to have to hire a physicist to figure out how to get this bidet in. This is not a Tushy bidet. These things are effective, powerful, glorious. And thank you, Tushy, for supporting this podcast. It has a 3-stream nozzle. not some lame one-stream blaster that's going to do nothing. Feels like a squirrel is spitting into your asshole. I want 3 squirrels blasting squirrel spit to clean me. That's what they used to do in Roman times. They have a anti-corrosion carabiner and a keyring for ultra durable performance. And even better, it comes in 3 colors. That's right. You get to choose what color you want it in. No more bidet fascism. Express yourself in everything you do, including what you use to clean your ass. Anyone can install this thing in under 10 minutes. They're easy to use. You just sit down, take a deep breath, relax, and turn that knob to spray a precise stream of fresh water into your butt. It's where your first chakra is, by the way. And most of us have a very stinky first chakra. How's that going to affect the rest of your chakras? You wouldn't put a layer of shit in your latte and then think because you have a straw, the shit's not getting in the latte. You think the energy that flies into your chakras isn't affected by your stinky ass? Think again. Every Hello Tushy bidet comes with a 30-day hassle-free return and a 12-month warranty. Stay shower fresh all summer long. No more swamp ass. Join the 2 million butts who already switched to Tushy. For a limited time, our listeners get 10% off their first bidet order when you use code Duncan at checkout. That's 10% off your first bidet order at hellotushy.com with promo code Duncan. Hello, Tushy. I'm never going to let you go. Thank you, Tushy. The choices you are confronted with upon losing a parent are pretty interesting, right? Because, like, if suddenly, have you ever been to a rave, Cody?
Not like a real. I mean, I'll say no.
We should go sometime.
Are they good ones in Austin?
I have no idea. I
feel like I'm too old. I had to do this 5 years ago.
We'll act like we're cops. My friend used to do that.
It's just like 23 Jump Street or something.
At concerts, because we're both old. He loves going to concerts. He's old. And we would go to concerts, and he would love to, say very loudly, "I'm not a cop! I'm not a cop!" And everyone would be so freaked out. But you go to a rave, and you're on ecstasy. The music is incredible. Everyone looks so beautiful because the lighting sucks. Not sucks. It's designed so you can't see anything, really. And then the rave's over. You got to go outside. And you look around at all the people that seem like beautiful elven alien angels, and they look fucked up.
Oh, yeah. It's like same with like a club or something too, right? Yeah.
Same effect. You look around, you're like, Jesus Christ, we're all dying. What have we done to ourselves? This is what happens with death. For a second, the lights come up, and you look around, and you're like, what the fuck is this thing? This is modernity? This is advanced civilization? Holy shit, we've gotten nowhere. Maybe we've gone backwards. And then you got to figure out a way to get the lights to go down a little bit if you want to reconnect and get back out there in the world. But I still feel like an outsider with people like you in the grief club. But what about you? How are you integrating back into society other than writing a brilliant book that helps people like me? How has your integration into society been?
No raves. We'll have to do a Texan or New York rave. That sounds good.
New York will be probably better if I had to roll the dice.
Probably a higher quotient, like a little Bushwick move or something, yes. Right? I wrote this book. It's really a journey, and really there was a sense of wanting to explore both things that I was interested in as ways to grapple with grief, and then also technologies and medicines that I'd seen as being something that we might be grappling with in the future and wanting to have those conversations now. So I was interested in everything as sort of small as laughter therapy, this idea that grief is really physiological and there, you might be able to have a cathartic experience through forcing your body to do certain things, i.e. laughter. And then I was also interested in artificial intelligence, and I started looking at this very early. I was a little frustrated, honestly, when ChatGPT took over the news cycle, because I was like, wait, I was on this so early.
Yeah.
But this idea of, is it healthy? Is it smart? What do we get out of it if we were recreating the deceased? I recreated my mom as a chatbot. And I mean, ultimately, with so many of these things, I found so many of these technologies, I found, yes, there's value in parts of it. A lot of the value comes in the time it really provides for reflection. So what are the questions I would want to still ask my mom if I was able to bring her back? What are the things we would want to talk about? What's been left unsaid? And less so maybe finding value in the actual experience of having this technologically aided conversation. And then looking also at very future things like optogenetics as a means toward memory deletion. It's used for all sorts of things. It's in brief, optogenetics is basically the introduction of a light-sensitive protein into usually a neuron, and through that you can turn the neuron on or off using a external fiber optic. And so there's a really fascinating study about, I think in 2014 at MIT and at UCSD that basically created and then erased memories in rats. So they'd like shock them in a certain area of a maze, instill a fear response to that area. They wouldn't go there. And then they would optogenetically take away that memory. Rats would go back to that space. And there was an article.
That's good news for people who like to torture rats, because it's like,
God,
they always avoid the shocks.
Oh, no.
You always have to move your shocker to a different part of the maze. You can't just enjoy what. It's great. I can't wait to get that for my rats.
Oh, no.
No, you don't understand. They're terrorists. These rats are really bad.
And there was such a fascinating Science magazine article that came out right around that time that said, are humans next? And then Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And it really got me thinking. So yeah, my integration was really in this exploration of what ended up being very individualized ways of grappling with grief.
Yeah.
And then the book really zooms out in the second half and sort of asks, is this the future that we want? Is this the way we want to be grappling with grief? Are there instead new ways of thinking about community, about legitimizing broader and newer forms of grief? Are there ways of looking to the past and past ways of grieving and ritual in other cultures in order to improve the way that we grapple with things? And there's psilocybin and there's bibliotherapy that I write about. So the process of integration was a long one.
What's the bibliotherapy?
It's relatively rare. There's not many bibliotherapists, but it is, as any Hellenophone would know, it is a book therapy. And
wait,
is
what's a
Hellenophone the word? I don't know. A Greek speaker? I'm not sure.
I need to send in an email to my guests. Like, guys, I'm dumb. Like, you got to dumb it down.
I don't even know if that's the word. I'm going to sound really stupid if that's not the word. Wait, we need to look it up. It sounds like hello phone. I'm like Greek speaker word. Is it a Grecophone? Oh my God, are we going to need to delete this?
Grecophone?
I don't know. A person who speaks Greek. I really had to think about that for a while. So we'll just say a person who speaks Greek.
Okay. What's Greek?
Maybe we can cut that.
Hey,
yeah,
what's
exactly.
Greek? I'm just kidding. I think I understand that.
So funny. Oh my gosh. Maybe. Okay. Abject silliness. Yeah, it's book therapy. And so I met with this woman called Ella Bertude, who lives with her cat outside of Brighton, England, has an amazing energy, incredible aura. And she basically had a therapy session with me for an hour where I talked about my mom, all the things I was struggling with. And then she gave me book prescriptions, so things to read and that would kind of specifically help with my version of grief. And I found that very moving, because I think a lot of us get really stuck in our head that, especially because it's something that's so privatized, but that grief is something that we don't share with others. Grief is something that's new because it's new to us. And reading something as ancient as Cicero mourning the death of his daughter Tullia, 2,000 years ago, is so incredibly moving, because you just realize there's this community of humans throughout history that have always dealt with loss, that have always had grief. And so I found bibliotherapy in that way really unlocked a feeling of community, and also gave me a sense of the degree to which grief is always a story. And my mom was a very religious person, and I think that I sometimes struggled with not always believing the same things that she did, and thinking and sort of coming to the realization through certain of the books. So she did such a good therapy session because she picked up on this, but gave me some books that, there's one called Some by David Eagleman that looks at, I don't know if you've read it, but it looks at dozens of different possible afterlives in a sort of, he's a Stanford neuroscientist, in a really fascinating way. And it really got me to think there really is no capital T truth. The stories that are valuable to us are the stories that we need at any given time. And I found that really empowering in that regard too. So yeah, bibliotherapy, hopefully it is indeed Greek. I don't know. But that for me was really opened up my eyes in a lot of ways. And art too, I would say. I don't know if we want to talk about that, but I found that to be a real perspective shifter too.
I don't talk about art on my podcast, Cody.
Greece and art, those are the Duncan knows.
No. You're not going to rope me into your New York liberal art thing. I don't even know what it is. Not interested. No, I mean, what I love is all of these. Well, most of them. I'll tell you. Definitely art.
Yeah.
A lot of it's great because in your book you're pointing out things that I think a lot of us maybe do instinctually. That we don't even realize what's going on, but you're reading like I don't know, maybe this isn't the best author to check out when you're grieving, but Edgar Allan Poe, who did live during a time when people were more before Keep Calm and Carry On, and Annabelle Lee. It's actually a very creepy poem if you think about it. It's like essentially a guy going and laying in a mausoleum. I don't know how to pronounce sepulcher, but
I don't know it either. Don't look at me.
But which in a weird way, like I guess you could say, books at one point were technology, it's super advanced technology. The printing press and like just the whole thing itself was
spreading ideas en masse. It's an incredible technology.
Incredible data storage mechanism. And now, I'm revolted by the idea of turning memories off. Revolted by that. Like that is to me something that for sure the military-industrial complex has their fucking eyes on. Because what's worse than when one of your troops gets all butthurt because their friend got blown off? That's a different kind of butthurt. Blown up. Because then you could just turn it off. Just fucking turn it off. And God, the possibilities there for fighting enemies. Just erase the memories of like why they're fighting. Terrifying. But the AI thing in particular, essentially creating digital clones of those who have passed beyond. I don't know. Did you see a video just popped up? I think it's in Japan, maybe. Maybe you could find it. Can you show him stuff? Well, it won't show up on Riverside, will it? Okay, I'll describe it to you. Grieving mother loses her kid. Virtual reality. Replicate the kid. So you see... This
is I mentioned this. It's the Korean documentary Meeting You.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. It's brief in there. Yeah. But it's, wild, right?
Ooh. And I see shit like that and I think of Pet Sematary. I think of like, you can't bear the grief. And so what do? You go and bury your kid in a cursed graveyard. And they're going to come back. But it isn't going to be your kid anymore. It's just going to look like your kid and maybe have you can project your kid onto them to some degree, but that's not your kid anymore. And so to me, I've thought a lot about it, the AI possibility and how just based on the grief illiteracy in the world and how unbearable it is initially, how much that is going to fuck people up. To even have that option is going to fuck people up. And it invites you to kick the can down the road, which, oh my God, with grief, I kicked that can so far down the road. I kicked the can down the road until I was having rage outbursts for no reason. Kicked the can down the road till I had insomnia. Kicked the can down the road till I had just a somewhat invisible, prolonged nervous breakdown. And that's all from doing the opposite of what you did. So I think, the anything that doesn't invite you to stay in the feeling is not so great.
Yeah, and I wanted to be really careful throughout too. I was really leaning on sort of being a journalist, being a reporter, and not wanting to advocate for anything, but also not wanting to be unfair to anything either, any possibility. So the book really lays out these things like AI, like optogenetics, as here's what's going on, here's what people say, here's what detractors say, here's what proponents say, and hopefully it inspires kind of a real thinking on the part of the reader of, is this something I want to deal with? And I agree with you that anything, oh my gosh, memory deletion, I mean, you talk about with war, I mean, war has been a place in which machines have been leveraged to emotionally distance humans from their actions for the last 100 years. I mean, Nazis were getting PTSD from having to shoot so many Jews that they created mobile gas chambers in vans. They got like just this separation and deleting a memory that as a possibility. I mean, most of the neuroscientists I talk to are saying, the human brain is so incredibly complex. It would be very hard to do this anytime in the near future. But I talked to one ethicist of neuroscience who is saying, in 15 years, we might see a rudimentary version of this starting to appear in humans. 15 years, that's very soon. Like we will be, it will be within our lifetime. So these are things that really merit, whether we believe him or not is a different question, but these things really merit conversation. And even if it's not about the thing itself, even if it's not about optogenetics itself, it helps really think about, what do we want to do with our grief? Do we want to get rid of it? Do we want to, quote unquote, cure it, as the sort of slightly winking title says? Or do we want to see that the kind of the real cure is being present with others and being present with ourselves and finding communities and really grappling with this in a much more engaged and sustained way than most anyone does in the US or the UK or a lot of the West?
Yeah, but how? I mean, to me, the ultimate problem with all of it is that it's not just like inviting people to communicate, to find community, to connect regarding this. But to me, the problem with it is the confrontation with death is a confrontation with modern society as we know it. And the, as a journalist, you have to train to be an observer. You have to train to not let yourself get sucked into the emotional components, or you'll take sides, and now you're going to have some kind of angle, some kind of slant that it could be some form of propaganda accidentally, or who the fuck knows what. And so journalists, and I'm so sorry to say this, I didn't like that movie Civil War. And I think it was trying to sort of elucidate the way journalists are watching disasters unfold, and their participation in that has to be purely like an outsider looking in. And like maybe that's, I don't know. I'm not going to get into some shitty stoner critique.
I haven't seen it, but
as a journalist, you'll like it. But but I think that also, social media is inviting us to be observers. It's inviting us to sit on the sidelines and watch other people's lives. And in doing that, you might actually think you're living their life when you're just sitting on the sidelines. And so the reason I don't see how grief literacy will ever happen is for grief literacy to happen, the discussion of value has to happen. And for a discussion of true value to happen, consumerism has to naturally get challenged because our value system is based on transactions of matter. And you know, the trope, the hacky cliche thing is on your deathbed, nobody's like, oh, how much money is in the bank again? Oh, you know what? I've got another month to live. That's enough time to get a new Ferrari.
I wish I'd bought that car. Yeah.
Yeah. No one's saying that. No one's saying that. Like 90% of the time, everyone is saying, please give me more drugs. This fucking hurts. No, 90% of the time, people are saying, or feeling the same things we feel once they pass on. Regret. Regret, because where we placed our attention and what we valued in the face of death has no value at all. And there's a sense of being scammed, being conned, being tricked. And motherfucker, that is a huge part of grief. So yeah, I don't know. Without completely revaluing everything we've been taught as valuable, I don't see how you can even start the conversation in a way that could create some kind of shift.
Yeah, I mean, just to add fuel to the fire of what you're saying too, with consumerism and grief and social media, you see this wild exploitation of collective grieving that companies and corporations do after a tragedy, where like Epicurious, the food site, said after the Boston bombing, they've deleted the tweet, but they tweeted, in honor of the victims of the Boston Marathon, we'd suggest these cranberry scones. And I know Cheerios, after Prince died, said like rest in Prince, and they had Prince on a purple background with a Cheerio on the eye. And it's so dark. When I try to be as optimistic as possible, I do see some kind of punching against that improbably opaque wall where I don't know if you clocked it, but I think it was in about 2013. There was a rise of funeral selfies that became a big trend.
Oh, yeah.
Where young people were pretty self-explanatory, taking photos of themselves in front of caskets and at funerals. At first, and obviously there was a whole chaos about it online and think pieces, and everyone had their say, but my first thought was, oh god, this is so exploitative, this is horrible. My second thought, that I think is a little more nuanced and a little more accurate to what I believe now, is these young people especially we've always lived in a privatized death is elsewhere culture. Is this an attempt to bring death into their community, into the fore in some way, in this incredibly clumsy and awkward way? But is there, I mean, you just see a slight move toward, or I hope toward, being a little more open about it. And there's been a slight rise in second spaces, I guess you'd call them, like this thing called the dinner party, which gets together people between, I think, 18 and 45 who've suffered a similar loss, and they do it in person, they do it on Zoom.
Yeah.
And it's just a place where everyone has kind of communal buy-in, they talk about it. So when I'm being as optimistic as possible, I do see a slight move away from that sort of death denial. But I think that, as you're unfortunately correctly saying, it's still very much moderated by the context of consumerism and corporate exploitation and those sorts of things.
Yes, and I'm so sorry, but I'm gonna. This episode of the DTFH has been supported by my friends over at Squarespace, fulfilling Terence McKenna's pre-singularity prophecy that as we approach singularity, the amount of time between what you can imagine and what you can manifest in the world will begin to exponentially shrink. In the old days, you imagine what your website would look like. Well, that's beautiful, wonderful. Might as well imagine a fairy forest or a land of peace peace. Might as well imagine the people of the world joining together and dancing in the streets as they realize human life energy is more important than war, that loving each other is the only thing of any real value in the world. You can think that all you want, hippie, but make it happen. Not so easy. You want to make a great website back in the early 2000s? You're going to have to go down to the website district to find a web designer, and they're out there jittering and shrieking in the streets. They look like scarecrows because they're so methed out they can barely talk. And if you can find a coherent one who can even listen to what your idea for a website is, you're going to be waiting months, potentially years, for some result. God forbid you want to do a revision or a change. They will laugh in your face. And sometimes when they laugh in your face, their rotten teeth fly out. Happened to me. I couldn't see for 2 days. Had a web designer's rotten tooth scratch my cornea. I still have impaired vision from that experience. Cut to today. Now, we have Squarespace, the ultimate Swiss Army knife for you if you want to grow your brand and create a beautiful website like the one you will find at duncantrussell.com, which is a Squarespace website. I would advise that you wear some kind of welder's goggles before you go on my website, because the beauty of the thing can be so overpowering you will get full amnesia. Many people have immediately bought plane tickets to Tibet to become monks. I don't know if that's a bad or a good thing, but if you don't want to do that, welder's goggles, and behold the beauty of my website, a Squarespace site. They've got all the tools you need for an incredible website, mix and match templates, shopping cart functionality. It sizes to any screen. I know what you're thinking. Okay, well, I mean, that sounds good, but blow my mind, dude. Okay, I will. They now have AI. Okay, you must check this feature out. Their new SEO tools blueprint function is the most mind-blowing thing ever, because now not only can you just think of what your website should be, you can describe it to a super intelligence who will then populate your website with all the text you need, perfect grammar, so that people looking at your website who haven't understood yet that just because you don't put a comma in the right place doesn't mean you're a bad person, won't judge you. The AI will do it all for you. It is insane. They have collapsed the time between website idea and website manifestation, and that means they are laying down tracks toward the singularity. I will not be surprised if Squarespace has some kind of nanobots coming up where you can manifest your website in the world, in time space, where they could dissolve the carcasses of roadkill and rebuild them into a meat website. I don't know. They haven't told me that's coming. I'm just speculating. But don't take my word for it. Go to squarespace.com/Duncan. You could try it out for free. And when you're ready to launch, which of course you will be, because you'll be so thrilled and excited, and you'll recognize that you are part of a greater momentum that's been going on ever since the first single-celled organism met another single-celled organism and hooked up and became had a symbiotic relationship, and then became multicellular orgasms, which did happen back then. A lot of people argue with that. Everything used to come all the time. It's a different commercial. The point is, try them out for free. When you're ready to launch, use offer code Duncan, and you will get 10% off your first order of a website or a domain. Again, it's squarespace.com/Duncan. Use offer code Duncan to get 10% off your first order of a website or a domain. And God bless you, Squarespace. God bless you for blazing a trail towards infinite immortality for all human beings and world peace. This is going to seem a little cynical.
Please.
Regarding the selfies. And
yeah, of course. I mean, it's very easy to read it cynically.
I love that you point, what did you call it's called? Publicity grieving?
It's an idea that this wonderful Australian ethnographer came up with.
I'm glad that you pointed that out, because I didn't have a word for it. And, I remember the COVID commercials were the strangest fucking things you've ever seen. Because like someone at Oreos is like, how do we sell more Oreos with a pandemic? Shit like that. Like, we know you're inside. Everyone's dying. Maybe it's time for Oreos.
Time to dunk these double stuffed babies. You're like, oh God.
I mean, it really does feel like Gnostic. It feels like the demiurge is mocking us anytime you see stuff like that. But as far as the pictures in front of the coffin, and you sort of, when you're talking about reading the memoirs, the realization that you could trick yourself into thinking this is dealing with it, when in fact it might be a distraction. And it made me think of something this Buddhist teacher, Chogyam Trungpa, said, describing the human experience. You're standing on a floor of razor blades, and you want a way out. And so what you do is you fantasize that there's a beam just above you that you can pull yourself onto, and then you then burrow into that delusion. You burrow into it and make a little nest inside the delusion, because creating a powerful distortion in the face of such suffering seems preferable to dealing with the reality of standing on a floor of fucking razor blades. And so publicity grieving, the selfies, maybe even making an episode of my cartoon about my mom dying, maybe even writing a book. And I'm so grateful for your book, by the way. But maybe all of these things are just various ways of not dealing with the reality of change. Radical, drastic change that is unavoidable, is going to happen. And sometimes I worry that, and I don't want to get, what's that book, The Denial of Death? I don't like that. All neurosis is based on the denial of death or something like that. But I think that's what the selfie phenomena is. I think that's what the public-facing side of grief is. I think that's what, because if I can take a selfie of this, it digitizes it and waters it down a little bit. It
shows you're still alive too, right? It's a proof of yourself,
I'm
right?
here. That's not me. But this is why, like, the bizarre Instagram posts that happen during catastrophes where people are filming and behind them some horror is happening. I think there's a false sense of safety. It's the modern way of sticking your head in the digital sand. Let's just fucking take a selfie. Now I can control it, turn it into a 1080 by 1080 square, and somehow it makes it a little less real. That's what I think. Do
you not see those as really proto and awkward, admittedly, but ways of trying to face the truth as we're so blocked off. We have so much denial in so many ways, but those are ways of like attempting as a young person can.
Sunglasses for death.
You view it as total BS.
I view it as sunglasses for death. It's like a way to dim the reality of it to some degree, because when, again, I everyone listening, I really hope that I don't sound as judgmental as I'm afraid I might, because I am saying it because I did it. I'm saying it because this is how I coped.
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, please.
I was just gonna say that there's definitely, I see the value in what you're saying of this radical, this is reality. Don't try to bullshit around it. Don't try to dilute it. Like, if you do that, you're as you said earlier, you're just kicking the can down the way. I guess I wonder if there's some degree to which you can kind of do both. Can you look at it through sunglasses so that at least you can maybe, to continue the kind of not great metaphor, to sort of like pull the sunglasses down your nose a little bit more. But is it an entry point, even as you're correct in saying that, yeah, of course we need to be honest that it's all razor blades beneath our feet, baby. Like that's life, that's death. We got to be real about it. But are there like oblique angles we can take
You're
to sort
so
of
right, Cody.
start to see that? I don't
Did
know.
you hear how angry I got? See, this is because I didn't do the work. You did the
No,
work.
this is
it's
good. I love a conversation.
No,
It's gorgeous.
I mean it. I mean it. I'm telling you, this is because I didn't do the work. It's still in me. I'm still fucking pissed. I still have the childish sense of like, this isn't fair. How is this fucking fair? It's like if my mom got kidnapped, and someone in a van scooped her up and drove away, people would know more about how to like talk with me about it than they do if my mom fucking dies. And then just the universal problem of it's like, oh really? So this is great. Whoever designed this is really awesome. So you just, lose like somebody, like your mom would be so proud of you. And
thanks, Duncan.
And you don't get that. Like, this Doug Stanhope, the comedian, has wrote about his mom's death and has some funny things to say about it that are very dark but incredible. One of them being like the worst thing about losing a parent is you don't have anyone to call to brag to anymore.
It's true.
You know what I mean? No one gives a fuck. Your mom, you could call your mom and be like, Mom, I threw a Frisbee farther than I ever have in my life. And they're like, wow, really?
You lose your mom and you lose your grandma. I don't get told that I keep getting so tall anymore, which is gutting.
Yes.
Gut-wrenching.
But you're right. I'm being an asshole. And this is what you're saying. This is one of the things that's beautiful about Brooke, is it's like, yeah, okay, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, yeah, okay, but maybe you could find your own way to do it.
Yeah.
The commonality being, but do it. Or like
grapple with it.
Grapple with it, yeah.
Lean into it, yeah.
Lean into it, and I think that's way better than whatever the fuck. You're on razor blades, man.
No, well, I don't know. I think that's I definitely understand that, and there's a section in the book too about this wonderful Buddhist hospital chaplain called Bill Crane, and he talks about he goes into these horrendous situations where the one he talked to me about was a mom had just seen her daughter die of an addiction overdose and was in the hospital and was shaking, couldn't move, could hardly talk. And he didn't say a single word to her. He just sat next to her for hours deep into the night. And he said that was and he talked to her later and they both said that was one of the most moving parts of her entire grappling with this loss, because there is this sense of honesty of there's nothing to say. Like this is the worst. It is the cellar of life and of life experience. And so to have that kind of honesty, which is what you're saying, I think in so many words, there's a real profoundness to that, and there's a real honesty to that actually can be valuable and can be comforting even in a really dark way.
Cody, I know you probably run out of time, but
I got time for you, Duncan.
Thank you. I have a prescription for you from the angry old man, the angry grieving old man.
Hit me.
Just popped into my head. Everyone's get ready, everybody. There's going to be a collective eye roll coming. You ever been to Burning Man?
No.
Do you know about Burning Man?
God, no Raven, no Burning Man. Honestly, I seem like the lamest guy ever on this podcast. You're killing me.
Are you kidding me? You're fucking cool. Get out of town. I seem like, I just talked about raves at Burning Man. I'm sorry. I'm at the top of the lame list, my friend.
No, you're old enough where you had like a cool Burning Man experience. I feel like, is it cool still?
Yeah.
Isn't it just like, is it still cool?
It's too big to not be. I mean, yeah, parts of it are probably dumb, but like,
sweet.
But do you know about the temple at Burning Man?
Elucidate. Tell me all.
So every year they get a new architect and an artist to build this incredible structure out in the desert.
Oh, right.
And people hang pictures of those who have passed on in the temple. And so you go in there and, you're walking out, like they don't let the art cars get too close to it. So you're in this loud, insane, like essentially like some kind of like elf dimension. Ridiculous, bombastic, beautiful, psychedelic. But suddenly you just walk into the temple and the energy is extraordinary. And everywhere you look, dogs, moms, kids, grandfathers, you name it. And the sound of weeping, the sound of people crying, and grief counselors who are just volunteering there, and not just like grief counselors from like Western psychology, but Sufis, and like they're all there. And I remember going in there, and you know how it is with grief. You're like, I'm not gonna cry. Like I'm a little more John Wayne than he's fucking burning. Right? You walk in and you feel it, and you realize what it is, like how incredible what they've done is, because it is showing you, just like reading those books, this is a universal experience. And I remember like sitting down crying. I have no idea who this person was, maybe an angel or something. And he comes and sits next to me and he goes, it hurts, doesn't it? And that was it. Arm around my shoulder, that was it. Oh, that was a big moment, because to me, I'm sorry. I get it. You just want to connect, but it hurts, doesn't it? That sums it up.
And think about what he's saying. He's saying this is valid. He's saying you don't need to get over this in 5 days. You don't need to get to closure. He's saying this blows and this is life, and we're connected in that. That's incredible. I do need to go. You gotta take me.
Because then after that, you go to the orgy dome.
The old one too. Oh man. Is it actually called the Orgy Dome, or did you make that up?
Indeed it is.
Wow.
Indeed it is. It is.
Wow.
Honestly, I have yet to go in there, but hey, maybe if we go, I'll take a visit to the Orgy Dome. I'm a never nude. I don't like taking my clothes off in front of my wife. I'm not going to take my clothes off in an orgy dome. Like maybe if I could do a fully clothed, like, I don't know.
Maybe you should take Tobias Funke instead of me then, I think.
Well, once I'll tell you more about it after I say goodbye. Thank you so much. Thank you for your book. On a personal level, thank you. Thank you so much and I'm sure so many of us out here are just like, Jesus, thank you. We all need it, everybody. And even if you haven't lost anybody, you got to read The Grief Cure, because it's more than just practical, personal ways that you can confront grief. The history, the many quotes, the treasure trove of other books that I now have to look at that you have introduced me to. It's a beautiful thing. So thank you. And it just came out, right? Like 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, it came out at the end of June in the US and in Europe, I think like mid-July.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. And thank you for reading so carefully and having I could have this conversation for another 6 hours. So I really do appreciate it.
Hey, we'll continue it in the Orgy Dome, man. You're the best. Thank you, Cody.
Thanks, Duncan. Appreciate you.
That was Cody Delistraty. Order his book, The Grief Cure. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you for watching, listening. I love you, and I'll see you later on this week. Bon voyage.